This is Cory Benavente, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
Hey, this week on The Break It Down Show, our special guest is Cory Benavente. He's a data analyst.
That's correct. Yeah.
He's definitely an audiophile.
Very true.
And both of those things play into our topic this week, which came from a conversation we had about how to increase our listenership.
Yep.
So you have some very specific thoughts about that, and then some ideas that I think we're going to take forward just to better serve our constituency.
Yeah.
Tell us about your qualifications first.
Sure. I graduated from college with a degree in communications and ethnic studies, where I kind of looked at things like race and identity and politics and stuff like that, which doesn't at all tie into what I do now.
But I'm a communicator and ethnic.
There we go. You would have been right at home. So after that, I went to Georgetown and I got another degree in communications from this thing called Communications, Culture, and Technology. And I kind of parlayed that into this technical position where I look at data and try and provide insights to clients and figure out how they can reach their niche audiences and kind of have success with what they're trying to do with the products that they make.
Okay. That means that you have a roster of clients, or are you client specific?
So I work for a consulting firm. I do one client at a time. So
Okay.
I've had multiple clients, but right now my client is a hospitality corporation. That,
That shall remain nameless?
That shall remain nameless. Yeah, I think. Well, actually, no. I could say So it's for Marriott.
Okay.
I do data and analytics for Marriott, and I try and answer their business questions using data and try and give them kind of a clearer picture of who they're serving and how they can best serve those people.
Well, Marriott is not a sponsor of the show. So while we won't disparage Marriott, I'm sure, I'm a Marriott Rewards member. And
that's exactly what I work on, actually.
So
that's
there
cool.
you go.
Yeah.
So what you're doing for them is trying to get me to engage further.
That's what it is. We're trying to figure out how we can get you to click more, how we can get you to have a deeper interaction with the product, whether that be the digital product or like the physical hotels, and not only you, but,
So ultimately the physical hotel, right? That's
Yes,
like the end
that's the
transaction.
end goal.
That's what means money for them.
Yeah. Well, so the big assumption in things like these is that digital interaction will kind of turn into a physical interaction. Right?
Okay.
And lots of people question that, but until there's a definite answer, I have job security, and
right. So
they're willing
conventional wisdom right now is that the more of my, can we call it browser share?
Yeah.
The more browser share Marriott has versus another hospitality chain, the more likely I'm to be loyal to Marriott.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
that's the assumption.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So, hopefully it's working. It seems to be working thus far. It's been a good year for Marriott. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you look at? I mean, is it purely Marriott data that you look at, or do you segment the population and look at demographic, psychographic? What are you looking at?
Sure. No, yeah, that's a great question. So some people pull in outside data, and some people try and compare Marriott data to usability data with other stuff, other people, other companies, organizations, that kind of thing. My specific thing going to what you were saying is for the rewards program, right? So of our existing customer base, how can we get more people to be rewards members? How can we get rewards members to have more loyalty to Marriott? How can we get people to reserve more room nights? The big push is, I think the big push for everybody is the millennial generation, right? So targeting who those people are, what are their spending habits, why are their spending habits that way, and how can we pull them away from
the other chains,
or for cabs, how can we pull them away from Uber,
right?
How can we pull them? I think in my space, the big question is how can we pull people away from these the Uber of whatever industry.
And that's the thing now, is to be we're the Uber of.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you hear so many companies billing themselves as the Uber of food, the Uber of pet service, the Uber of daycare, whatever. Right. And it's a good model, but.
It is, except that model has, correct me if I'm wrong, that model has failed already in a lot of those spaces.
Yeah.
So to be the Uber of, pet care products, there was pets.com.
Yeah.
They were the Uber of pet products, and they're not with us anymore.
Yeah.
And then there was the Uber of grocery stores. It was called Webvan, and they're not with us anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are we actually just relaunching things with a little bit of insight from what has happened before, or are there revolutionary changes that you're seeing in those products that truly make them the Uber of something?
Yeah, I think lots of ideas are kind of recycled or rehashed and implemented with minor tweaks and minor changes to kind of try and feed into this, millennial generation or zeitgeist or whatever's going on. Another pertinent question I think that ties into this is from the labor perspective, right? Like the people, not the people taking the rides, but the people who are giving the rides. Is it an equitable system for them, and are they getting the benefits and the living situations that they need to kind of harness or to sustain themselves, right? And I think by and large, they're not. There's lots of issues popping up with programs like Uber and stuff like that, and how do they reimburse people in a fair and equitable way? So there's definitely, it's a young industry, I think, is the overwhelming thing, right? And so,
so in its youth, it's filled with ideas, enthusiasm. It's maybe filled less with wisdom that comes from, it would seem like if it's not equitable on the labor side, that ecosystem is going to melt. It's just going to.
Yeah. Certainly.
And then is it a matter of, well, how long can we milk it until it melts?
Yeah.
Or is there a push to create longevity? And I have to imagine with Uber that they're kind of the extreme case, but they've got a lot of smart money behind them. They got, guys like Chris Sacca and stuff who are saying, no, we're going to do this right and we're going to do this for the long term. Or Chris Sacca is going to sell because he got in for like $400,000 and now his Uber stock's worth like $400 million.
Huge, yeah. Well, with things like this and conversations like this, my question is always, is a bubble forming, and when is the bubble going to burst, right? And what kind of effect will that have on the market? Not just the Uber market, but like
right. Where will the industry go? How will the industry recover?
Yeah, and all the industries that kind of rely on something like Uber. So like for me, in a data position, if I had a client like that and that bubble were to burst, what would I go to? Like I would have to find some other niche market that wants the kind of thing that I provide. So it's a very, very tedious thing, and I'm mid to late 20s. So I was younger and I didn't really know as much when the previous bubbles in my life.
Your legs were different at the previous bubble.
Exactly, right? So this is a learning experience for me as well to what am I watching out for? What's the timeline and the scheduling for this type of thing? And unfortunately, I don't really think that there is a definite timeline or a schedule for this type of thing, and it's just kind of throwing
it's truly like bubbles. You get that wand out of the soap and you blow all these bubbles and you look at them and you go, oh, look at that one go. Oh, no, it's gone. And some of them last a little longer, and then you go chasing that little one around and the wind keeps blowing it around and it remains somehow. And the trick is to figure out what is that somehow.
Exactly.
And how do you recreate that each time?
Yeah.
So I think, though, that Marriott's a good comparison to our conversation about growing our listenership, because I don't think Marriott's in a bubble. From what you've told me and just from what their business is, they have to be long-term thinkers. They've got a lot of money invested, and they're in the hospitality industry while it's evolving because of
Airbnb.
Airbnb is the Uber of hospitality.
Definitely.
So I remember when Airbnb just started, my focus specifically was the vacation rental industry. So when you go do your, 2 weeks in Myrtle Beach in the summer, and the company that rents somebody's house to you to do that those were my clients. And a lot of what we were thinking about Airbnb as partnerships started to establish and we were watching industry trends was, it's only a matter of time before some multiple rape/murder happens in somebody's house. Yeah. And that they thought the same things about Uber as well. And that doesn't seem to be slowing anything down.
No, not at all. Would you say that you live in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
That seems like an interesting place. That geographic location kind of is like a ghost or a specter on these conversations, right? Because it's such a mecca.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah. Like, So
for our audience's sake, Cory's based in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and in Arlington, which is maybe like a couple minutes drive from D.C., they call it the tech corridor, right? And there's all these kind of tech firms that are headquartered there. But everyone's frame of reference is the Bay Area.
Okay.
And everyone sees it as this boiling pot that's just like bubbling. And there's all these cool, exciting entrepreneurial ideas going on.
Also, it's funky there, and we got a lot of fine girls.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digress.
No, that's more important. You know? But see, the girls line, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, see? Right. That creates a statistical anomaly every time. You want to disrupt the statistical model? Insert fine girls.
Oh, man.
Also, not always predictable, the fine girls. So, anyway, if you're looking at the Bay Area, I don't know, does that mean that we are to be considered every time, or to be considered especially because we behave differently from the rest of the country, or what does that mean?
Well, yeah. For me, that's the big question, right? Like I see it, you know, as an outsider to the Bay Area and as someone who's never really lived there. It's painted as this place that has all these really cool, exciting, creative networks of people who are just throwing ideas off of one another and looking for funding for the next big thing.
Okay.
And so we talk about disruption and how the Uber of XYZ industry is going to disrupt that industry.
Mm-hmm.
The Bay Area is playing a huge role in that story, you know, and in that narrative. So I, as an outsider, as somebody in that industry, but outside of that geographic space, it's really alluring, you know, and I don't know if that's accurate and if it holds up to that, but yeah, I really look up to the Bay Area, and I really it really holds interest to me as far as how they do things, what it is about that area that brings all these people in and just kind of incubates all these ideas, you know, and acts as a launching pad for these really interesting ventures that people are doing.
It is a launching pad. It is an incubator. It has all of those qualities, and I think that it's based because of how we are socially there.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean?
Well,
you're based socially?
I think that because we've always been counterculture, because we've always accepted counterculture, even for the people in the Bay Area because there are conservative people in the Bay Area, and those people have to be, in order to exist in the Bay Area and not go insane, I imagine, have to be tolerant of the counterculture that exists there. It's just a reality. I mean, I grew up in Vallejo, California, where everybody is represented. There's no dominant ethnic group. Condé Nast named Vallejo, California, the most ethnically diverse city in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it's true. I mean, when I was growing up there, now Vallejo produces athletes and rappers. Yeah. So that tells us a lot about the demographic of Vallejo overall, or the dominant demographics that exist there. You know, ethnic, certainly. And a lot of urban sensibility in a suburban area. Yeah. Also, while there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of abject poverty, there are a lot of people broke. Mm-hmm. That's just ghetto reality. And in my neighborhood when I was growing up, which you know, I grew up in a neighborhood that was not that. I grew up in a neighborhood where I didn't see, you know, we didn't have blight in my neighborhood, but we had every ethnicity. But every household in my neighborhood had, all the fathers were present. Everybody was gainfully employed. I grew up in a nice neighborhood, but there was no dominant race. So there was no way to get around getting along. Uh-huh. And that was so pervasive that it never dawned on us that we wouldn't get along because of race. It truly never dawned on us. There were, like I said, everybody. And if I put black against white, well, they couldn't really concentrate on the fight between black and white because there was so much brown. Yeah. And there were so many of us that, you know, there wasn't one race that could cause too much trouble for the others because every race was outnumbered. Uh-huh. So if that's a microcosm of the attitude in the Bay Area, well, that attitude just created a place where we all learned how to work together. Mm-hmm. You know, we learned how to work in teams and get past prejudice. We learned how to coexist and thrive. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the Bay Area has on a number of levels. The socioeconomic, there isn't an upper crust in the Bay Area. They exist, sure, but it's not like South Carolina or Virginia, where there are some very clear old money delineations. Mm-hmm. This is how you behave because you are a insert old money family name here. Mm-hmm. And you don't associate with those people because they are, whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's what does it in the Bay Area. Sure. I mean, we're just too busy doing stuff that we don't worry about any of that.
Okay, so I'm picking up like three themes, right, from what you've said, which is like cultural diversity, mm-hmm. economic, maybe not necessarily hardship, but like some kind of economic issue, or like aspect of what's going on. And then
you think that's a motivator?
I don't necessarily. Well, so that was my question,
it's
right?
A factor. It may be a motivator, but it's certainly a factor of some sort.
So diversity, the economic factor, and then just a countercultural kind of spirit, right? Mm-hmm. So are you saying that those are the three things predominantly that really, really play a role in how creative people see the Bay Area and how people kind of see it as this incubation space for cool ideas, whether it be in tech or music or art or, any kind of space. Well, I think those are the three.
Yeah, since you put it like that, I think yes. I think those are the factors. And they aren't necessarily the causes, but I think they create the causes in that, first of all, the ethnic diversity allows for true meritocracy. The other thing about growing up in Vallejo was that I have never, and I think I speak for a lot of people, I have never felt held back. I had just as much shot as anybody else. And I think when groups, no matter what they are, socioeconomic, racial, whatever, when groups are past the barrier of feeling held back, you can get a lot done. Mm-hmm. Also, when groups are past the barrier of being held back by not being able to work with those people because of whatever prejudice exists, I think you get the best cast, you get the most talented. It really allows for true meritocracy. Yeah.
So, I have these time periods in my head of just really cool creative eras, right, of humanity. And so like Harlem in the 1920s or like Greenwich Village in the 60s, mm-hmm. Or these are all New York examples, but New York City in the 80s.
Berkeley in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So not even just creativity, but just cultural shifts, right? Mm-hmm. Things that kind of push humanity forward as a whole.
Which are often artistic or somehow reflected in the art of the...
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why the Bay Area is such a captivating thing to talk about now, because it is a cool mix of arts and of tech and of professionalism and of food. You hear just great things about the food scene in the Bay Area, and to have all of it kind of coalesce in this one space is a really, really exciting thing to watch. So
it is pretty magical because at the same time that I've never felt disclosure for our audience. Cory's my cousin. Yes. We're from Guam.
Yes.
We both grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
But we both would go back to Guam and visit. And I don't know if you had the same experience because there's a few years between us. But I remember going back to Guam when I was old enough to understand what trends were popular, what I liked, what my tastes were, what kind of cars were cool. And I remember seeing what kind of cars people were driving and going, man, that's kind of a cheap imitation of what we're doing in the Bay Area. Why do you have wire hubcaps? Why don't you get Trues and Vogues like everybody else? And I remember hearing these words, we don't have those here.
Yeah.
And the acceptance that, we just don't have those here was such a foreign concept to me. It was like, well, if you don't get it.
Yeah.
Which is that's the pervasive attitude in the Bay Area. Yeah. You want something? Go get it.
Yeah.
You can have it.
Yeah.
It exists. You can have it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that same attitude exists in other places, mm-hmm. a lot of other places. And mm-hmm. I think it holds back business. It certainly holds back innovation. Mm-hmm. And it makes people complacent in how much they're getting done.
Which part makes people complacent? Like what?
The attitude that, well, we don't have those here.
Okay, sure.
You know, to be able to say, just to have that sentence in your vocabulary, we don't have those here. You know, was not something that ever would have dawned on me.
Sure.
Growing up in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
If you want it, go get it.
Yeah.
They have those in LA. Fat Laces came out in New York. We had them the next week.
Yeah.
You know, something happened in LA. You know, remember, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, it was like OP or whatever was happening. You could get it.
Yeah.
And you should. And that's what you did.
Yeah.
So, to me, in business, if you are hampered by, we don't have those.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's not going to foster your best idea.
Yeah.
It's not going to foster performance that outshines everybody else.
Yeah. Sure. Well, so in my head, this brings up an interesting question that I've wrestled with, and I would love to get your input on this. Do you think...
who's interviewing who?
No, I'm loving
or
this. Whom? So for creative pursuits like recording music or painting or cooking, just anything like that, do you think not having something pushes people to make better product?
Sometimes.
Yeah?
I mean, I do also subscribe to the, I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who said, the ultimate enemy of cinema is lack of limitation.
Okay, yeah.
I think that was, somebody look that up and comment if you feel like it. But, so I think that there is something to that. But when you are so limited that it hampers your imagination, then, you know, I think that's working against you. So there are two sides to each of that coin. But if you're talking about food, you know, if you're in, I love Southern food.
Oh, yeah.
I love Southern food that was born of plantation conditions, and I love collard greens.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I think if you're going to be a world-class chef, if you're going to be the best of the best of the best, you got to learn the ingredients, and you got to have access to, I don't know, blowfish.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, just to try it and see what you can make with that.
Yeah, and to understand that dynamic.
Yeah.
Or that it just exists.
Yeah.
So, yes, being backed into a corner does make somebody creative.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
But I think that when we talk about cutting edge technology, we're not talking about being backed into a corner.
No, not at all.
I think we're talking about absolutely blowing the roof wide open and saying, this is limitless. You have to think without limitation.
Yes. But I think to be able to do that, you have to know your medium really, really well. Right. Okay. So like people always say, you know, like Picasso's stuff is just really, you know, it's just squares and lines. Like it's not that good. When in reality, like he could do very, very real, like realism drawings, right?
Yeah.
With like perfect shading and just capturing the human form like a photograph, right?
Right.
But he just knew his stuff so well, and he knew how to use the pencil and the paint and the paintbrush so well that he could achieve these things that looked simple, right? But he was just such a master technician.
So he wasn't drawing cubist shit because he couldn't draw somebody's face.
Yeah, exactly.
It was that he had mastered the mundane.
Yeah.
And was taking the limitations all the way off.
Yeah, and I think that applies to everything we've been talking about. So, you know, like with food, a lettuce, it's lettuce, right? But if you really, really know how to cook food, you can make damn good, a really, really great, delicious dish out of something like lettuce because you just understand your craft so well. That you know how you can take something and make something just really, really, really great and really, you know, pushing the medium forward. So,
okay, we have the lack of limitation that seems to be a curse in some people's eyes, but we also have in the Bay Area, to your point, arguably the best public school in the world in Cal. We have Stanford. We have places where somebody who grows up in an environment that is a meritocracy can say, well, you know what I need to do? I've found what my craft is. I need to develop my craft. I want to learn from the best. So I'll go to Cal, or I'll go to Stanford, or I'll go to Davis, or I'll go to, there are a number of schools in the area where you can prepare yourself that way and still benefit from the thinking, the lack of limitation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's something to that mix that exists also.
Yeah, I would agree that it's a balance. Like it's a fine line that you have to draw, because if you like popular music, right? Most songs have like a 8-bar intro, 16-bar verse, 4 pre-chorus, and then like a 16 chorus. And so there are those limitations of popular music, but within that, if you're really good and if you know your stuff really well, and if you're able to leverage relationships to get the right mix of people working on the project, then you can really, really have great results, even if you do limit yourself to a certain structure or certain ingredients or a certain medium. So I really think that, knowing your product, knowing your audience, and knowing your own talents and your own abilities, if you're able to harness those 3 things in a really meaningful way, then that's where you kind of get the optimal product, and you're able to put it out in a way that speaks to the audience and that the output really achieves the goals that you're looking for. But again, I think the key is just self-awareness in all of those aspects, which is hard, which is really, really hard. And that's why, companies and organizations are really trying to figure out who their audiences are, how they can speak to those audiences, what it is about their product and their brand that...
Who they are.
Exactly, yeah. So, it's like all knowledge is self-knowledge, And so I think the best thing you can do is just kind of figure out what it is you bring to the table, why people like what you bring to the table, and how you can deliver it in an effective and efficient manner, which is way easier said than done, Like...
I'll say, man. So our challenge here is that we are absolutely elated and blessed to have about 1,700 listens a week. Some people shy away from that number, and I will say that we don't always tell our guests what that number is, because we've had some amazing guests.
You have.
We had Jay Moore on. Yep. He's got 1 million listeners every week. I didn't dare tell him, well, you're going to get a whopping 1,700 with us, Jay. And we've had that good fortune, but specifically that, I'll say this. When we sat down with Jay, we chased Jay around for a few months before he said, all right, let's do it. And when he did, we went, okay, here we come. And then he had us over to his office at Fox Sports in LA, was very generous with his time, was very generous with his information. And one of the things that he told us was, guys, the guest is not the needle mover. Mm. And we thought, well, you get 1 million listens every week. And I know that I listen to many podcasts. Mm. I listened to Mick Betancourt because he was on Jay's show, and I heard him there. Mm-hmm. I listened to Dean Del Rey because he was on Jay's show.
Sure.
I listened to Barry Katz because he was on Jay's show. Mm. So I figured, hey, we get Jay on our show, somebody's going to listen to us.
Yeah.
But it works the opposite way.
Sure.
So I think that's what he was telling us, which was the guest may be an amazing guest, mm-hmm. but the needle doesn't move because of the guest. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen, which is, we're 75 episodes deep. Mm-hmm. His show is like 680 episodes deep. He's been at it a long time.
Yeah.
So he gets to say with reasonable authority what moves or doesn't move the needle. And that was his observation from his show. And when we told us that, we thought, wow, that's kind of disappointing for one, and surprising.
Sure. Well, so I personally would agree with that.
Okay.
Because, while there is value in the guests that you have, you don't get to 1,700 a week or 1 million a week just on
guest alone.
On guests alone, like there's a personality behind the product, and there's a brand behind the product, and the fact that you do put up these numbers every week, which you're modest about, but I don't think you should be. Like, that's 1,700 people a week don't listen to what I say. You know what I mean? So that's cool.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's very
1,700 people evidently are going to listen to what you say this week, and no more are going to listen to the person we have next week.
If you like the show,
and you do,
send us some pictures of your movies.
Don't do that. Support the show.
There are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics, and it helps us get better placement Number 2,
Visit our website.
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay, you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
We like boobies.
But so, yeah, I would agree with what he was saying. But it sounds like you were hesitant to.
I didn't want to believe it.
The
I thought,
assertion.
man, we finally got Jay Moore. We're going to get a million... I knew that wasn't going to happen necessarily. But, last week we put up Billy Corben. And he's one of my absolute favorite filmmakers. I think he's probably... I would pin on him that he is the documentarian of our generation. And we have 1,700 listeners. I mean, he tweeted everything.
Yeah.
Did us a great favor by coming on the show, did a great show with us, and then brought his people. Hey, everybody, I was on this show. Go check it out.
Yeah.
And approximately 1,700 of them did.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know that number, was our number, his number, some combination. But that's what happened. And I think what I will say is that gradually that number grows, but very gradually.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that there are more of my people out there.
Yeah.
So how do we get to them? And how do we cement our relationship?
Yeah. Well, so that's those are the big questions behind data mining and data analysis, right? Like who is soliciting us for the product and why are they soliciting us for the product? And how can we specify it more so that our brand and our product really has the immediate punch to where people know what they're getting from us, know to come to us for what they want. And, how do we continue to provide that on a regular schedule?
It's funny to think about it from not the consumer standpoint, because as you say these words to me, I think of myself and my own consumption habits. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't put it together like that. That's how I get more of me, because I'm going to get people to behave the way I would behave toward this product. So what am I missing? How do I find more of, I guess, first of all, I have to identify the segments in my audience.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so there's this whole practice popping up right now called customer experience, right? Which is in the digital world, from the first click to the last click, right? Whether the last click be purchase or completing the survey or exiting out. Yeah. Any of those. What is it that draws the customer in? What is it that repels the customer? Do they find what they're looking for quick enough to keep their interest going? Or are they just totally done with the product and did we just turn them off completely? And there's so many, consumer studies and stuff that kind of try to mine that experience for any kind of insight. And it's a really, really hard question to answer, because even if you have all of the data, making sense of it is a whole other venture that kind of takes a while. So, I think the big question for something like a podcast is, who's listening? Where are they? What's their age group? How are they listening? Are they listening on a computer? Are they listening on their phone? Are they downloading it? Are they streaming it? And all of these things kind of feed into why are they here? What are they looking for? And are we delivering it? But if you're putting up these numbers consistently, then you are delivering something. People are coming for a reason, and they are getting it, right? The question, though, is...
And some of them keep coming back.
Yeah. So
Thanks.
there's definitely...
Thanks, people who keep coming back.
That is very cool of them,
Yeah.
So, the big questions, of course, are, what do they want? Why are they coming here? And how are they getting it?
Answer those questions for us, people.
and
I mean that in the most serious and sincere way.
Sure.
Because I want to know, what is it we're delivering that we're delivering correctly? What is it that's resonating with people and making them go, yeah, I'll give those guys my ears for the commute time.
Yeah.
And that's as much as I can ask from anybody to tell them, for them to tell us, hey, man, this is what I like. And we'll try to deliver that and keep delivering that. But I like to think that since we are not asking and gathering that information formally, that we are doing it in a way that's, well, I use the word sincere again, because the people who are coming back are the people who are consuming this. Look, I have guests on this show because I like them.
Mm.
You know, most of the people that we have are guests because we admire what they've done, what their work was. We were somehow moved by it. So I like to think that the people who are consistently listening to us are like-minded.
Mm-hmm.
They enjoy the music of these people. They enjoy the art of these people. They enjoy the strategy that or find interesting what, you know, these people have done for us. So, you know.
Yeah. So during the making of the podcast, not just isolated episodes, but the entirety of, you know, the podcast lifespan up to this point, have you ever asked yourself these types of questions, or is it more so, I'm really into this guest and I'm really, really into what he or she does. I would really just like to have a conversation with this person and kind of put it out there, you know?
It's been the latter, hands down.
Yeah. And there's like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because, you know, I think the word you used was sincerity. Is that the word you used? Yeah. That's a very, very sincere, you know, genuine way to make a product. And there's integrity behind it, right? And there's passion, you know, and you know, there's that Seinfeld episode where George is always talking about artistic compromise and how he refuses to give in to artistic compromise. And so, yeah, like I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. It's more so just doing it your own way, and then
fucking data analysts. Man. You know, there are no experts. There are only those who test. And you know, no, there's got to be an expert somewhere. I need answers, Cory. I don't need questions to my questions. So who is my audience? What do you think? I mean, having listened to several episodes of the show and having understood kind of where I'm coming from, what do you think our audience is? Who's listening to the Break It Down show? And I know that there are several answers to that are, you know, maybe 60% of our audience is described most generally this way, 30% described somewhat generally this way, etc.
Yeah.
But who do you think's listening?
Sure. Okay, so I would say from the episodes that I've listened to, and this ties into the conversation we had last night, right? So in my line of work, we do this thing called persona building, right? Where we kind of just build up this figment of our imagination person, right?
And she's called Negative Nancy, or right?
Exactly.
You give her a name.
Exactly. We give her a name.
Him or her.
We find a stock photo for the person. We just have like...
You understand who that person is.
Exactly, right? So when I think of your show and the way that it's publicized, at least to me, the publicized shout-outs that I see about the show, I see it on Facebook. I see it on my mobile phone. I listen to it on my mobile phone. And then as far as topic, I think it's people who are into records, who are into music, who are into like nostalgic music.
Use the word records.
Yeah, definitely.
You think it's people who are into records?
Yes.
Because sometimes when we're talking about an artist's piece of work, I refer to it as, oh man, I really love that record. I mean, I use that word to describe what I consume of that person's.
No, and that's an important distinction, right? Because you know, the customer who says CD is different than the customer who says song, is different than the customer who says record, right? Those are three very distinct things. So on the persona of the ideal listener, not ideal, but like of the persona of the listener of this show that we're picturing, it's probably a dude, right? Probably someone who spent some time in record stores, probably somebody who plays an instrument or is into music.
To the level where they understand, yes, because we nerd out.
Yeah. And I don't think that's something that you should shy away from, you know? Like in our persona person to me also nerds out, right? And spend some time digging through record crates and all of these things.
On in.
So yeah, that's my initial cut of the persona. And I'm sure you could add stuff, but to me, again, it's audiophiles, people who probably have a record player in their home, people who are probably streaming it on their mobile phone, people who care about audio quality, people who read liner notes on the records. You know, and as I'm saying these things, I'm getting a picture in my head of the type of person that you would want to target.
What's he look like?
Oh, man. Okay, so he's got either longer hair or like some facial hair, some facial stubble. Maybe glasses.
What does that mean? Does that mean that there's a counterculture undertone?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
But so So this ties in with our earlier conversation about geography, and I haven't had any insight into the data.
Right,
your
we've
metrics,
not
right?
seen any.
No, yeah, like none. We haven't discussed it. I haven't seen it.
I'll just drop one piece of information, which is probably just a digression in this conversation. We've had one listener in Iran.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Mind blowing. Anyway,
so is the geography of your listenership pretty dispersed, or is it? Would you say it's focused on California?
it's focused on California.
Okay.
Yeah, and I imagine that those who are listening outside of California are into what's happening in California, maybe even transplants.
Okay.
So, but yes, you're right. It's local centric, and then there are pockets that exist in places, but it is California's our biggest market.
Yeah.
And then depending on what we're doing and when we look, we just see little spurts that happen here and there. But please continue. What's he look like?
Yeah.
So a little bit of facial hair.
Yeah. Wearing a t-shirt or a hoodie. Shorts or jeans.
Okay.
And sneakers. And this all can sound kind of like it's conjecture or like it's useless, but really, like, if we were to contrast this with, I'm from DC, right? We mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
If we were to contrast this with a podcast made in DC, the persona to me would be totally different, right? It would be a guy without facial hair, a guy who uses hair gel, a guy who has Warby Parker glasses on, a guy who, wears a button-up collared shirt and tucks it into slacks and wears loafers.
Loafers, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And those are two very, very different people. And those people, they come to the podcast for different things. They're looking for different products, and they may access it differently. And so the clear kind of vision that you get of this kind of alpha user, alpha listener, the better that you can just kind of harness that idea. And, but so the question to you then as the content creator is, if you have that insight, do you contour the way that you create the content, or do you just keep on doing what you're doing and try and market it differently, or try and get it out to certain people that you weren't trying to get it out to before?
That's a fair question. I think that we continue to do what we're doing just because that's what we know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking for Pete while I do this because Pete is a very different guy. For me, there are a lot of places where Pete and I intersect personality-wise, and that comes out in the show. But there are a lot of places where we're a mile apart.
Mm.
So somewhere in the middle of that, I think, is where that guy with the facial hair, because, Pete's got facial hair.
Mm.
I think when it comes to nerding out in music, that's what I do. It's not what Pete does.
Yeah.
But, is Pete in touch with counterculture? Sure.
Yeah.
So there's a little of that. But there are also two very distinct types of guests that we get.
Mm-hmm.
And those two distinct types of guests are divided between the two of us as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that dynamic also exists. So I think if we're going to talk about the alpha, and if you've described our alpha in this guy wearing jeans, you essentially described like Keanu Reeves. And I mean that in the most complimentary way. If anybody out there is not into Keanu Reeves.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Right, but
awesome.
that's who you really described was Ted.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of slouchy in the way that's endearing.
Yeah.
He's wearing a t-shirt, not because he wouldn't get away with putting on a tie, but because he'd rather wear a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And I like that audience. That audience, that's my people.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to change that at all.
Yeah.
Now, how do more of them? And by the way, I get that it's a dude.
Yeah.
And if our female listeners are out there, thank you, female listeners.
Yeah.
We love you as well.
Of course, certainly.
Believe you me. So I love a chick who plays the bass.
Oh yeah,
because how
alluring.
often do you see? Yeah, when you see a chick playing the bass, especially if she's bad, and you just go, "Oh my god, what's going on here?" Chicks who play the drums, chicks who play the trombone.
Yeah,
just these typically masculine instruments. So chicks who listen to podcasts.
Oh yeah, that's
anyway,
great.
If we look at that guy, Well, I'm curious. Okay, so you're going to pick out a photo of this guy.
Uh-huh.
And in our meetings where we discuss trending,
Yeah.
we're going to put up a photo of this guy,
Yep.
and we're going to talk about how the data shows us what this guy's doing.
Mm-hmm.
What color is that guy?
Oof. In my head, initial cut, he was a white guy.
Okay.
But then that contradicts our earlier conversation because we said most of your listenership is in California, right?
Yep.
And we were talking about how diverse of an area the Bay Area is.
Yeah.
So if your listenership is very heavily focused in the Bay Area, which is it? That's an assumption on my part.
Yeah.
Is it?
It is.
There's a lot. Okay.
It is.
So that would be an incorrect assumption on my part that he was a white guy,
Mhm.
right? And that's a misstep on my part for assuming that. But so,
but it says something. I mean, and I don't know that you're incorrect because I have a picture in my mind of specific listeners
yeah.
who are out there.
So you played this game as well.
Not really, but because you're describing
Yeah.
him to me,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some very specific people in my head.
Yeah.
P. Crosby. And he fits that mold. He's
Okay.
in touch with counterculture, wears a t-shirt because he feels like it,
Yeah.
can have this conversation. You know, he can nerd out with the best of us.
Uh-huh.
And when we talk about Miles Davis, he knows more about Miles Davis and the spirit of Miles Davis and the music of Miles Davis than most anybody,
Yeah.
you know, of any color.
Yeah.
So I say that because I would think that, and I've never tallied it up, but if we looked at all of our musical guests,
Yeah.
I would say our musical guests predominantly make what you would classify as black music. You know, we've had a lot of funksters on.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of hip-hop artists,
Yeah.
things like that. So I haven't had George Lynch on the show, although we'd love to have you. What's up, George Lynch? This, but to that point, like this Tuesday, we're scheduled to interview Angelo Moore,
Okay.
black guy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't classify Fishbone though as black music.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really, it speaks to Bay Area sensibility, which
Yeah.
is, this guy might be white and love black music. This guy might be black and in a ska band. This
Yeah.
guy might, so it's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, so when we do these exercises and we use these personas, right, to kind of drive the way we carry ourselves and the way we make our product. We have multiples, right? And so the one I was describing in my head is this overarching thing, broad strokes, what I see as your most ardent, right, and your
Mhm.
repeats. Do you have multiple personas in your head, like in the wake of this conversation, or do you have, like, is that the one that you mentioned? Is that the one that you think is by and large most of your audience segment?
I think the spirit that he embodies that made me think of him first
Yeah.
is the spirit that exists in our regular listeners,
Okay.
regardless of all the other indicators that
Sure.
they may show.
I see. Okay.
You know, they're music nerds, or
Yeah.
they're artists, or they're appreciators of art that is outside of their own.
Yeah.
That is a key thing right there, because we had a bass player named Dave Agent on our show, and he is nobody funkier than Dave Agent, for the record. It's possible that nobody listens to our show more regularly than Dave Agent as well.
Yeah.
So there he is. And one of the shows that he's commented on that I know he listened to and enjoyed was Dr. Bob Greenberg, who is a classical composer. So I think if there's something to the persona, it's probably that this guy defies type. The guy that you're describing may have some facial hair, may wear a t-shirt, may have Vans on, may have longish hair, probably, combs it, but not much else. And it's not because he fits into a box. It's because he defies the box.
Sure. Yeah.
That's how I would describe Pete Crosby. That's how I would describe Dave Agent. That's how I would describe Rich Uggan. That's how I would describe many of our guests and listeners. So I think that's what we're painting. We're painting a picture of a guy who's almost a picture in spite of his habits, as opposed to because of them.
And so how do you see this person hearing about your podcast? Like, what's their first touch?
Question. Their first touch, in most cases, their first touch has been probably some like-minded individual sharing a special show with them.
Okay.
So in other words, if I stumbled upon a podcast like ours and it included a guest that I knew you would appreciate, I would say, hey, Cory, check this guy out.
Yeah.
And then you might become a more regular listener of our show because your friend was that guy and your first show was that particular show. Does that make sense?
Yes. And you think it's like a direct word of mouth thing, like person to person, or do you think it's like Facebook, or do you think it's
There's probably been a lot of Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably been some. The funny thing is, I think, and again, I'm very proud of and happy to have our 1,700 listeners.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe 5 of them have hit the subscribe button. I don't know about the subscribe on iTunes or anything like that. This is what I mean to say, is that 5 of them have rated our show.
Okay.
So, hey, everybody, if you want to support the show, hit that rating button on iTunes and help us get some ratings. Because I think what we're missing is iTunes recognizing us and recommending us and saying, hey, you listener of these products, you fit the bill of a person who would listen to this product and bringing us in.
Yeah.
So that may be something that we could do better at. Help us out, everybody.
iTunes, sure. Okay, so from my end, when I hear that, the assumption then is that iTunes itself is like a pretty big driver of traffic for the show.
That is only because I say that because that's how I listen to the show.
Okay.
I listen to the show on my phone, on the podcast app, which I have an iPhone, so that's iTunes.
Yeah.
And I know that when we launched our show, we launched on iTunes, and so we've never been without it. So I can't say that we've done, side by side test and that having iTunes with us was more of a, or that we get our audience from there or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess in my head I have done this exercise, and the exercise tells me based on what I do.
Yeah. And it
which I know is wrong to do in general. Like, you shouldn't base what you think your audience is doing because that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's not how everybody does anything.
Yeah.
But what else do you think is missing? I mean, where do you think we can find more of that guy?
So my first touch with the show was Facebook.
Okay.
Right? Like I saw you share an episode, and then that's how I found out A, that you were doing it, B, that, you were having really cool guests on,
Yeah.
So I don't know if Facebook is a
driver for podcasts in general.
Yeah. I have no experience with that kind of thing.
Right.
And with our alpha persona person, I don't know how plugged into
engaged
Facebook.
in Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because that in and of itself is a really, really big assumption, and I think lots of people make that assumption too early.
Yeah,
because people will pour time and money and effort into Facebook marketing, Facebook advertising, that kind of thing, without really knowing.
Maybe not know that that's where your audience will find you.
Yeah,
Because so the other comparison that we've made, and it's an unfair comparison, I have no business making this comparison, but I've made it already, is Jay Moore.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's on Facebook at all. I know that he tweets. I know that he has 1 million people who follow him who don't follow him at all because of Facebook.
Yeah.
So maybe the answer is to do more live events, because I know he gets a lot of his audience from. He's, number one, got a big legacy audience, and then number 2, constantly doing live events where he can introduce people to the content that he produces.
Yeah.
So more live events.
Yeah.
A live event. How's that?
That'd be awesome.
Huh.
But so yeah, I think at this point, to me, the juiciest insight that you could get from the alpha persona is how is that person, Johnny listener or Jane listener, how are they getting contact with the show, and then how can you kind of sustain that contact and prolong that contact into repeated listenership.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, I said this before, but I think it bears repeating. Like, lots of people just assume that Facebook is the major driver. And I don't think that's the case in every situation,
Yeah.
And certainly for the person we're talking about who's digging through crates, looking at liner notes, there's a good chance that person isn't that engaged in Facebook at all, and so if you were to dump a lot of time and effort into it, it's not a definite payoff, I don't think.
Wow.
Unless you kind of like...
that is a huge insight, man. That's...
I mean, take with that what you will, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe Facebook is a major driver, but, you would need more clarity of the persona to kind of know. But
I think we can say that Facebook has been a driver in some instances.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are more on Facebook. We had Tommy McElroy on the show. He is an avid Facebook user, has a lot of friends he keeps in touch with on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And we gained a good bit of listenership that thankfully has stayed with us.
Nice.
From Tommy's batch of friends and the connections in the periphery.
Mm-hmm.
So there are instances where that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But one of our shows that is just anomalous in how regularly it shows up in the top 5 is it early on. I don't remember what episode, but it might have been like number 7 or 8, or 7 and 8, because it was a 2-parter with Tara Kemp.
Yeah.
And she was it was a great show. We learned a lot about her. We learned a lot about the record business and what happened to her in the business in that era of, she was a pop songstress with really strong R&B sensibilities because she was from the Bay Area and had a serious set of pipes, and that kind of artist is different.
Mm-hmm.
And we had her on the show because we love her, and she was great, but she consistently has, that was a year ago that we did her episode, and still, if I look at the top 5 this week, she'll show up in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So she's just got mad staying power. Now, she's on Facebook, but she's not. I wouldn't say she's actively promoting her appearances and stuff on Facebook. That's not her main contact with the world.
Yeah, yeah. So there was something about either that conversation or the fact that it was her that just kind of drives people to that episode and kind of keeps it up there. Okay.
She's got a fan base that I think is just going to never go away for her.
Sure.
And so that's great.
Yeah.
And we were great recipients of the goodness of that fan base. But, it just, I think the point I'm making is that you're right. Facebook, from time to time, will be useful to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's maybe not where we're finding Ted.
Sure. I also noticed that in the 2 examples, you used the guest's social network presence.
Mm-hmm.
Is that that's a pretty big driver for you? Like how the guests kind of leverage their fan base to bring in their existing fans to listen to the show?
See, now that you're asking me the question, I don't think so.
Okay.
Or I don't think it should be.
Yeah.
I think the answer that I should tell you is no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes back to Jay Moore's statement that you brought up earlier, where the guest doesn't push the needle.
Yeah.
Right? It's more so like the core of the product, the core of the show, which is the personalities behind it.
Huh. All right. Well, hey man, we've had you for an hour. We just plopped an hour out.
I really love this.
Yeah, this is good. We should do this more frequently. I think the next step for us is going to be that we're going to pay attention to some of these insights, allow them to guide our promotional behaviors. They're not going to guide our show behaviors, listeners. So if you are that core dude, man, hey, I got your back.
Nice.
We're going to continue to do what we do because that's how we like to do it. And hopefully our people will stay with us because we're doing it right. But maybe we're going to look outside of what we've been doing so far and see if we can find more of our people in places elsewhere. Yeah. Cory Benavente.
Yeah, thanks for having me.